A Day in the Life of Empress Victoria, the German Crown, British Sass, and a very bad cough. AKA, Mummy, please stop writing. It's 47 pages long, and I'm dying. Welcome back to the channel where we read royal diaries like they're celebrity group chats and where German imperial drama is just part of the furniture. Today we're doing a deep dive into a day in the life of Queen Victoria's eldest daughter, Empress Victoria of Germany. Also known as Vicky, she was born to rule and then married off into a country that, frankly, didn't deserve her. Let's roll back the curtains, fire up the politically awkward organ music, and get ready to suffer in Prussian silence. Because this is the story of a princess who woke up British and went to bed Prussian every single day. Rise and whimper. 6 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. Vicky wakes up in the Prussian Imperial Palace, which is somehow both over-decorated and freezing cold. Her room is furnished in that classic 19th century dead animal everywhere style. We're talking fur rugs, taxidermy owls, and enough heavy curtains to block out the sun and her joy. She coughs. Of course, because our girl is suffering from chronic illness. Most likely breast cancer and pleurisy by this stage of her life. But still, she gets up because no one's ever given this woman a day off. Her maids come in with hot water, a letter from her mother, inevitably, and a schedule for the day that includes imperial duties, trying to make her husband care, dealing with court gossip, not offending the Kaiser's moustache. She opens her letter from Queen Victoria. It's 16 pages long, handwritten, full of opinions, underlined sections, random asides and passive-aggressive questions like, I suppose you've not yet instructed the children in the proper Anglican catechism, followed by 5 pages about gardenias. Breakfast of Empresses, 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. She has breakfast alone because her husband, Crown Prince Frederick, aka Fritz, is either out drilling troops or too polite to eat loudly in front of her. He's lovely, but also tragically dying of throat cancer. Basically, the only thing that's louder than their silence is the tension from her in-laws. Breakfast includes tea, imported from England because of course, a dry bread roll, her own resentment lightly buttered. Sometimes she eats with her children, but given that her eldest son is Wilhelm, yes, that Wilhelm, aka future Kaiser Wilhelm II, and he's already being groomed by his Prussian grandparents to loathe everything British and soft, it's not exactly cosy. If you're imagining a child sneering over jam and yelling, Anglophile propaganda, you're not far off. Dutiful suffering and diplomatic gaslighting, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Time for royal duties. As Empress-in-waiting and consort to the Crown Prince, Vicky is expected to host foreign diplomats with charm, not express her own opinions, fail, pretend everything is fine, also fail, act like Bismarck isn't actively trying to ruin her life, extra fail. She meets with charity committees, but quietly, because German court etiquette didn't believe in royal women doing too much good. The Prussians were all about severe morals, stiff collars, and keeping the women ornamental but politically irrelevant. Vicky, raised on British liberal values and her mother's firebrand feminism, is very much not that. Every idea she floats? Shut down. Every suggestion she makes? Too English. Every time she coughs? A servant quietly leaves the room so they don't catch. Feminism. The midday mailbag from hell, 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Oh look, another letter from Queen Victoria. Yes, another one. Today's correspondence includes gossip about Princess Louise's latest scandal, complaints about Princess Beatrice's hairstyle, rewritten plans for German education policy, detailed instructions on how to deal with Otto von Bismarck, and passive-aggressive concern about Vicky's weight, phrased as, I only mention it, dearest, because you always were such a strong walker as a child. Vicky writes back while coughing into a lace handkerchief, pouring out her soul in beautiful, desperate English, all of which will be neatly archived at Windsor Castle for us to read centuries later and go, "Oh no, girl." Lunch and royal lip-biting, 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. Lunchtime, the court assembles. Her in-laws, including the Dowager Queen Augusta, arrive dressed for battle in satin and sarcasm. Everyone speaks rapid-fire German while criticising Vicky's every move. If she speaks up, too opinionated. If she's quiet, too aloof. Meanwhile, Wilhelm, still sulky from breakfast, throws a fit because he wasn't allowed to hit a servant. Someone brings up politics. Someone else brings up the British. A chair is metaphorically thrown. Vicky eats a single bite of boiled meat and smiles through the pain. Her husband Fritz gives her a supportive glance, but he's too ill to do more than blink slowly. And Bismarck? He's off somewhere cackling into a brandy glass. Afternoon. Diaries and doom scrolling, 19th century style, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Vicky retreats to her room. It's the only time she gets to breathe. She pulls out her diary, which is less, "Dear Diary," and more, "This is how I survived the Prussian Empire with grace and internal screaming." She writes about her frustrations with her son, her fears for Germany's future, her hope that one day Ast shall be remembered for something other than marrying badly. She reads political papers and medical pamphlets, trying to hide the growing signs of breast cancer. She plans charity work that she'll later be blocked from doing. She rereads her mother's letters and rolls her eyes while also crying. It's complicated. Dinner. Formal, forced, and full of feelings. 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Dinner is a glittering affair. Servants, chandeliers, roast meats. Vicky wears an uncomfortable corset and a necklace of diplomatic tension. She's seated across from people who think she's too clever, too English, too much. Her son Wilhelm brags about horses. Her husband coughs quietly into a napkin. Bismarck isn't there, but he's always spiritually present, like a sour ghost. Everyone drinks too much wine and argues about France. Vicky says one thing about liberal reform, and someone nearly chokes on a sausage. Evening. Regret and the weight of the crown. 8 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. At last she retires. She reads, she writes, she doesn't sleep. Vicky has done everything she could to be a good daughter, a loyal wife, and a reformist consort. But Germany doesn't want her, and England has left her to fend for herself. She stares out of her window towards the dark gardens and wonders, what will happen to Germany when her husband dies? What will Wilhelm become? What would her life have been if she had ruled anywhere else? She closes her eyes, and in the quiet of her room, beneath portraits of people who never quite loved her enough, the future Empress sighs. Empress Victoria never got her crown in the way she hoped. Her husband died just months after becoming Kaiser, and her son, Wilhelm II, would go on to drag Germany into World War I. Her liberal ideals were buried under iron and ego. But her letters survive. Her ideas survive. And her legacy, while complicated, tells us this: even in the tightest corsets, under the heaviest expectations, and with the loudest mothers, there lived a woman who dared to think for herself. A day in the life of Princess Alice. Grief, germs, and Gothic tragedy in Darmstadt, aka the one who knew too much, loved too deeply, and had a tragedy every Tuesday. Welcome back to Past People, the series where we rummage through royal letters, peek behind palace curtains, and cry into lace handkerchiefs because apparently no one in this family was allowed peace. Today, we're diving into a full day in the life of Princess Alice, Queen Victoria's second daughter, the most intelligent of the bunch, and the one who suffered more Gothic trauma than the entire cast of a Bronte novel. This is not your typical fairy tale. It's Darmstadt. It's domesticity, and it's death, with a little disinfectant and a lot of grief. Let's begin. Waking up in Weimar Gothic realness. Time, 6 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. Princess Alice wakes early, very early, because she's got 6 kids, a chronically ill husband, several philanthropic foundations, and the weight of all her siblings' emotional messes on her back. The bedchamber is cold. This is the Grand Duchy of Hesse, not Windsor. No bustling staff, no endless luxury. Just an aging mattress, some practical lace, and the sound of someone coughing in the hallway. Probably one of her kids. Alice wraps a shawl around her shoulders, because her immune system is barely hanging on, and checks the basin. She's still spitting blood. Lovely. We are by this point into the final tragic act of her life, and she knows it. She doesn't tell anyone. She has far too much to do. Breakfast with the traumatised. Time, 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. Breakfast is taken quickly. There are 6 children around the table, including young Marie, her baby, the one who was named after her dead sister and seems destined for heartbreak. Her husband, Louis, the Grand Duke of Hesse, is sweet, but honestly, a bit of a himbo. He tries, bless him, but Alice is the one running this house, running this duchy, running herself into the grave. She sips weak coffee, offers her children a slice of fruit bread, and thinks about the letters she has to answer. One is from Queen Victoria. Of course it is. Today's edition includes emotional guilt, complaints about Bertie's gambling, demands for more frequent letters, and passive-aggressive reminders that Alice married below her station. Duty, death, and disinfectant. Time, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Alice spends her mornings managing everything: the household, the court, the sick. She is a hands-on philanthropist, deeply involved in nursing reform, having learned directly from Florence Nightingale during the Crimean War. She works with hospitals. She helps bury cholera victims. She even visits dying children. Yes, personally. She doesn't flinch from blood, vomit, or death. What does hurt is when the court in Darmstadt gossips about her, calling her too English, too clever, too outspoken. But she endures it, because someone has to. By late morning, she's drafting notes for the Red Cross and managing child illness number 4 of the day. Letters from a distant mother. Time, 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Back at her writing desk, more letters. She replies to Queen Victoria in perfect English, smoothing over the emotional landmines and trying not to cry. She writes to Vicky in Berlin, her sister, her closest confidant, and her intellectual equal, about philosophy, the state of the world, and the endless illness that stalks her house like a shadow. She writes to Princess Helena, urging her to continue nursing training. She writes to Bertie, begging him to behave. She writes to Beatrice, who's probably stuck to their mother's side like a corset. And then she writes in her journal, because there's no therapist in 1878, and Alice has no one to talk to but the page. And in that moment she contracts the same infection. The last good-night time, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. The house is dim, morning has begun. Alice drags herself to the remaining children's bedsides. They ask where Marie is. She cannot speak. Her own fever begins. The sore throat, the exhaustion, the dizziness. She tries to hide it. She tries to function, but her body is finished. She asks for her journal. She makes one final entry. She tells her older children not to cry. She tells Louis to be strong. She doesn't tell her mother. Not yet. Your loving child, Alice. Time, 8 p.m., midnight. Alice lays in bed, drifting in and out of consciousness. The candles flicker. Outside, snow begins to fall across Darmstadt. Inside, the palace is silent. She dies on December 14th, the exact anniversary of her father Prince Albert's death, a symmetry that would devastate Queen Victoria. She dies quietly, gently, still young, still full of ideas, still entirely too good for the world she lived in. She was 35 years old. Princess Alice was never crowned, never celebrated, never given the royal treatment she deserved, but she was, without question, one of the most intelligent, most compassionate, and most tragic members of Queen Victoria's entire family. She believed in science, in service, in love, and when death came, she faced it the way she lived her life, with grace and courage, and the unflinching honesty of a woman who knew far too much about suffering and kept loving anyway. A day in the life of Princess Helena. Needles, nursing, and never allowed to leave, aka the one who married a German surgeon and became queen, Victoria's in-house admin assistant. Welcome back to Past People, the place where we take minor royals and give them the major recognition they deserve. Today we're entering the world of Princess Helena, Queen Victoria's fifth child, third daughter, and the royal equivalent of a really dependable middle manager who never gets a raise. While her sisters were being tragic, brilliant, or rebellious, Helena was busy, sewing, nursing, and trying to get 5 minutes alone without her mother popping into the room and asking her to take dictation. This is the overlooked, overworked life of the daughter who did everything and still got none of the credit. Let's begin. Wake up, the Queen needs you. Time 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Princess Helena wakes in her suite at whichever royal residence Queen Victoria currently refuses to leave. It could be Windsor, Osborne, Balmoral, it doesn't really matter. The point is, Helena is there too. She's always there. Because while the others managed to escape, Helena was the daughter who stayed behind to prop up the Empire's most emotionally needy widow. She's barely dressed before there's a knock on the door. "Helena, bring your needlework, and the blotting paper, and the draft of the letter to the Archbishop. Yes, it's her mother, already. Breakfast with the matriarch. Time 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Helena takes breakfast with Queen Victoria. It's not so much a meal as an emotional ambush. Topics include why Helena shouldn't get married, why Helena's opinions are wrong, why Princess Beatrice is the favourite now, and why Prince Leopold needs more tending to. Helena sips weak tea, nods politely, and mentally counts how many stitches she can complete during the Queen's monologue. Letters, lace, and passive aggression. Time 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. This is administrative hour. Helena sits beside her mother as an unpaid secretary. She reads letters aloud, takes dictation, and writes replies. Sometimes they're to foreign royals, sometimes to hospitals, sometimes to weirdly obsessed spiritualists. All the while, Victoria interrupts every 5 minutes to reminisce about Prince Albert or complain about the state of European politics. Meanwhile, Helena is secretly organising correspondence for her own pet cause, the Royal British Nurses Association, which she helped found to professionalise nursing and promote women's work. But she can't talk about that too loudly, or Mummy might take it away. Midday musings and matrimonial misery time, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Let's flash back for a moment. Helena wanted to marry. She had a few love interests, including the dashing Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein, who wasn't exactly the hottest ticket in Europe, but she liked him, and most importantly, he was willing to live near her mother. Victoria objected, loudly, for months. She eventually relented, reluctantly, and then punished Helena by making her stay close forever. While other daughters moved to Germany, Helena stayed in England, in court, in service, always a handmaiden to her mother's grief. So yes, she married, but she didn't escape. Lunch, Louisa, and letters that sting time. 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Lunch is served in suffocating silence or queenly lecture, your choice. Sometimes Helena dines with Princess Louise, her younger sister and polar opposite. Louise is an artist, a rebel, a woman with opinions. The two of them don't always get along. Louise might talk about sculpture or politics, and Helena will smile politely and pretend she doesn't think it's unladylike. Internally, she's screaming. But mostly, it's another meal eaten under the judgmental gaze of Queen Victoria and the framed portrait of Prince Albert. The hands that healed time, 2:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. Afternoons are Helena's domain. This is when she shines. She visits hospitals, works with nurses, advocates for better sanitation and training. She does public service in the most literal sense, not for headlines, not for vanity, but because she genuinely believes it's right. She also embroiders, endlessly. She's always stitching something for someone. Baby blankets, altar cloths, prison charity gifts, you name it. Her hands are never still. She's a practical royal, not flashy, not dramatic, but deeply kind, and maybe, just maybe, a little sad underneath it all. Evening with Christian, Tyne, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Evenings are spent with her husband, Prince Christian, who is, honestly, fine. He's there, he's loyal, he calls her Helena, he lets her talk about the Queen without complaint. They read together, play cards, drink tea, occasionally attend functions or entertain boring military men. Their relationship is not passionate, but it is comfortable. A kind of royal cardigan. Warm, familiar, a little worn. They live not in glittering palaces, but in relative simplicity. Frogmore House or Cumberland Lodge, away from public glare, but never too far from Victoria's reach. Night falls, duty remains. Time, 7 p.m. to midnight. Before bed, Helena returns to her mother's side. Queen Victoria often summons her late, to talk, to cry, to relive the same story about Albert's last words. Helena listens, holds her hand, offers quiet comfort. She's been doing this for decades. She then slips away to her room and finally breathes. She reads, often religious texts or charity reports. Sometimes she sketches needlework patterns. She writes letters to her own children, trying to be more emotionally available than her mother ever was. And then finally, sleep. Tomorrow will be exactly the same. Princess Helena didn't die dramatically. She didn't rebel. She didn't even move far from home. But in a family full of tragedy and theatrics, she was the calm in the chaos. She founded institutions, wrote books, supported nurses, and stitched her way through grief and royal obligation. History rarely celebrates the quiet ones, but Helena deserves more than silence. She was steady. She was smart. She stayed. And sometimes, that's the bravest thing of all. A day in the life of Princess Louise, sculpting scandal and snubbing tradition, aka Queen Victoria's least compliant daughter and the marble, chisel of chaos. Welcome back to Past People, the place where we unearth royals with more sass than sense and more ambition than their mothers could handle. Today, we're cracking open the wildly underrated, wildly unconventional life of Princess Louise, Queen Victoria's 6th child, 4th daughter, and a royal who straight up said, "No thank you, I will not sit in your box of expectations. I'll be out back carving statues and ignoring your opinions." If you're looking for embroidery, docility, and playing piano at Windsor, move along. Louise had a sculpting studio, a secretive marriage, and enough artistic angst to start her own bohemian rebellion. Let's begin. Louise awakens mildly hungover but beautiful time 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Louise rises late by royal standards. She's not her sister Helena, dutifully awake before dawn to fetch blotting paper for Queen Victoria. No, Louise slept in, probably in a cloud of incense and scandal. Her room is full of unfinished sketches, marble dust, and dramatic shawls flung over chairs. There are artist tools on her desk, letters from art students, possibly a banned book or two, a very artistic mess. A lady in waiting tries to announce the morning's agenda. Louise replies, "Tell Mother I'm at my studio." She is not. She is still in her dressing gown, staring wistfully out a window and contemplating how to move to Paris without anyone noticing. The Sculptor Royal time, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Louise heads to her studio, yes, her sculpture studio. She was trained under professional artists. She exhibited her work under a pseudonym. She actually worked, like physically chisel in hand, hauling stone blocks kind of work. Today she's working on a bust, possibly of her brother Leopold, possibly of some beautiful society woman she had a huge emotional attachment to. It's unclear. She won't say. She'll just smile mysteriously and go back to chiselling. Court gossip? Boiling. Because royal women weren't supposed to have jobs. They certainly weren't meant to be alone in studios with half-naked models. And Louise didn't care. Lunch with her eyebrows raised time, 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Louise reluctantly attends lunch with her family. Queen Victoria, maybe Helena, maybe a smattering of grandchildren. Victoria makes some comment about Louise needing to be more feminine. Louise says something like, "I've just spent the morning shaping marble with my bare hands. I assure you I'm quite woman enough." Tension. Helena drops her spoon. Beatrice whispers, "Oh my God." Victoria pretends not to hear. But she definitely heard. Louise dabs her mouth with a napkin like she hasn't just set fire to the room. Art, angst and afternoon disappearances. Time, 1:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. The afternoon is for escape. She might disappear into the city for art gallery visits, host meetings with feminist thinkers under the guise of charitable planning, flirt with journalists and deny it later, or vanish entirely into a secret carriage ride with no itinerary. You will not find her darning socks or sewing altar cloths. She might be writing a letter to someone named Susan or Francis or Arthur, with passionate but ambiguous language that historians still argue about. She definitely is avoiding another request from her mother to sit still for a portrait. The "Fine, I'll marry him" chapter. Time, flashback, interlude. Let's rewind. Louise did something absolutely chaotic by 19th century standards. She married a commoner. Well, okay, he was titled later, but John Campbell, Marquess of Lorne, was the first non-royal to marry into the British royal family in centuries. Everyone was scandalised. Why did she do it? Was it love? Was it rebellion? Was it a quiet way to get out of the palace? No one knows. Their marriage was complicated. Some say Lorne was gay. Some say Louise had affairs. Some say they lived largely apart after a few years. All we know is Queen Victoria hated it. Canadian chaos. Time, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Louise did her time as the Vice-Regal Consort of Canada. While Lorne was Governor-General, she became Canada's First Lady. She hated the cold, she loved the art scene. She got concussion in a sleigh crash and didn't tell anyone for days. She did not stop being extra for a single second. She painted watercolours, attended gallery openings, and made polite fun of Canadian architecture in her diary. She eventually left and never looked back. Evenings of elegance and emotional walls. Time, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Back in Britain, Louise spent her evenings hosting artistic salons. Her guests are sculptors, poets, painters, and a few extremely beautiful women that biographers pretend were just friends. She's aloof, witty, always slightly out of reach. She loves deeply but rarely says so. She never discusses her personal life in public. and she'll never confirm or deny the many rumours, romantic, political or otherwise, that swirl around her. She ends the night by scribbling in her journal. It's coded, cryptic and fabulous. Sleep, eventually. Time 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Louise lies in bed beneath a velvet coverlet staring at the ceiling. She's probably thinking about artistic legacy, women's rights, her strained relationship with Queen Victoria, and whether she left her favourite chisel in the sculpture garden again. She sighs. The palace is too quiet. She dreams of Florence, of marble, of being free. Princess Louise never fit the mould. She didn't want to marry a prince. She didn't want to spend her life writing letters for her mother. She didn't want to sit still, stay quiet, or stitch silently. She wanted more. She lived long, outlived her siblings, outlived her husband, outlived the Victorian age itself. And though history tried to box her in as a footnote, Louise left behind sculptures, secrets, and just enough scandal to keep us guessing. She was the artist royal, the rebel duchess, the one who never explained herself. And really, we wouldn't want her any other way. Let's wrap the Daughters of Queen Victoria series with the most loyal, most suffocated, and possibly most emotionally blackmailed royal daughter of all time. A day in the life of Princess Beatrice, the royal ghostwriter and emotional support daughter, aka when your job is to never leave. Your mother, even after death. Welcome back to Past People, where we remember royals who got trapped in palaces and told it was a privilege. Today's episode? Brace yourself. We are diving into the hauntingly codependent, tragically obedient life of Princess Beatrice, Queen Victoria's youngest daughter, the one who never left home, never got a break, and spent decades editing her mother's diary like a full-time job with no pay, no breaks, and no HR department. This is a day in the life of the royal child who was born last and still got stuck with all the paperwork. Wakey wakey, right for Queenie time, 6:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. Beatrice wakes up in a bedchamber that is technically hers, but also still emotionally haunted by the ghost of Prince Albert and her mother's endless sobbing. She opens her eyes and hears Queen Victoria's bell. It begins. Today's tasks include reading yesterday's diary aloud to Her Majesty, transcribing dictated letters, cancelling any social plan she dared to imagine, pretending she doesn't want a life of her own. Beatrice gets dressed in a gown the colour of eternal widowhood, grabs her notepads and heads for the Queen's chambers, because this isn't a day off, it's Beatrice duty, episode 9308, breakfast, with surveillance time 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Beatrice eats toast, Queen Victoria eats Beatrice's soul. They sit together. The Queen discusses the weather, court scandals, and what Beatrice's siblings are doing wrong today. If Beatrice mentions wanting to go to a luncheon, Victoria tuts and says, "You know I cannot do without you." This line has been her prison since childhood. Beatrice has been told since she could walk that she was born to stay with Mama. All the other children, Helena, Louise, Vicky, had married or escaped or died. Beatrice? Nope. She was the emotional sponge for the entire monarchy. Diaries, dictation and death anniversaries. Time, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. The next several hours are spent typing up Queen Victoria's journals, copying letters into neat script, listening to endless monologues about Albert, editing decades of grief into readable prose. Beatrice is editing her mother's past in real time. If something is too personal, too scandalous, or too sad, it's removed. Beatrice shapes the official royal memory with a quill and a weary sigh. And let's be clear, this is not a 9 to 5. This is a lifetime subscription to Victorian widowhood with extra footnotes. The lunch that wasn't. Time 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Sometimes Beatrice dreams of tea with friends, a walk, a carriage ride, just a moment of autonomy. Today, she asks politely if she can visit the garden. Queen Victoria frowns. Is it truly necessary, Beatrice? And just like that, the answer is no. She eats quietly beside her mother, again. The food is bland, the air is thick with mourning. A portrait of Albert looms above the mantel, silently judging them both. The love that, almost, got away. Time, flashback interlude. Now let's talk about Beatrice's love story. Yes, there was one. Prince Henry of Battenberg, handsome, flirty, a breath of fresh German air. Beatrice fell for him, hard. Queen Victoria's reaction? Nuclear-level meltdown. She refused to let Beatrice marry, said she'd never allow her to leave. For months, Beatrice and Henry literally did not speak because Victoria was so mad she iced them both out. Eventually, she caved, but only if Henry moved in with her. Yes, the Queen let her daughter marry, but only if the husband agreed to live at court permanently and basically become a glorified royal intern. So Beatrice got her man, but never got her freedom. The afternoon editathon. Time 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Back to the desk. Beatrice continues editing Queen Victoria's journals. This is a colossal task, tens of thousands of pages, decades of emotion, secrets, politics, grief. She works like a medieval monk, hunched over vellum, quietly removing anything that could damage the myth. She crosses out lines about arguments, erases royal tension, tones down rage, pain, and awkward confessions. When Beatrice dies, she'll have destroyed countless original pages, gone forever, but she believes she's protecting her mother's legacy. Others say she was controlling history. We say maybe both. Tragedy, again. Time, flashback, interlude. In 1896, Henry, Beatrice's one true joy, volunteers for a military campaign in Africa. He gets on a ship. Beatrice waves him off, begging him to stay. He contracts malaria, dies at sea, alone. Beatrice is shattered. She's left a widow at 39, with 4 children, and no support. Queen Victoria? She gives condolences, but also immediately resumes dictation the next morning. Beatrice mourns, quietly, with her pen in her hand, and no break in sight. Evenings of editing and emptiness. Time, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Dinner is uneventful. Conversation is scripted. Beatrice helps her mother into bed, listens to her final thoughts, and then returns to the desk. She writes late into the night, corrects commas, rewrites phrasing, preserves the image of a queen who became an icon, but who also devoured her daughter's life in the process. The palace is quiet. Beatrice finally closes her journal, alone at last. Time, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Queen Victoria dies in 1901. Beatrice is 44 years old. Finally, she's free. But she's also completely unmoored. She keeps working, keeps editing, keeps writing, for 30 more years. She dies in 1944 at the age of 87, having outlived nearly everyone. And with her, the last breath of that Victorian age finally fades. Princess Beatrice was more than her mother's shadow. She was a writer, an archivist, a loyal daughter, a broken-hearted widow, a woman whose life was shaped entirely by other people's grief, and yet she never stopped working to preserve their memory. She didn't start revolutions, she didn't sculpt marble or run hospitals. She simply stayed, edited, endured. And sometimes that quiet endurance tells us more about royalty than all the crowns in the world.